Are we doing an intro or anything like that?
Uh, this is the Disgruntled Crab and Rusty Culture most professional review show! And here we are in this most professional review. We're actually going to be taking a look at another, what is described as the Iron Age of content creation by one of, if not the guy that dubbed the term, one who has been very vocal in its use. We're going to be reviewing The Long Moonlight by Razor Fist, the first in the Moonvale series. I will let you start us off in this non-spoiler section. What were your impressions of this?
I'm a tough person to please when it comes to books. I'm very impatient. I struggle to sit and continue through things, and this is a fairly short book, yet I still struggled to get through it. And I'm not quite sure why, because not going into spoilers, the things that really attract me to books are strong world building, and this book has that. I like strong characterization, and this book sort of has that. So I can't really put my finger on why this didn't capture me. But again, that's take that with a grain of salt, because most books don't capture me.
I will say that when I first purchased this, I actually thought it was a comic book. So I was kind of surprised to see that it is more of a pulp fiction style of writing. That is the actual literary style, not the movie reference. So anytime we're referring to pulp fiction in this, it will be more of the old style of pulp fiction from the early 1900s and on. So not the Tarantino movie. We're talking about the actual literary style. I would say I enjoyed it. There were certain sections, and I think this might be the style that he was going for with this. Again, to harken back to that style of writing, there are a couple spots where it feels like, for the sake of continuing on with the action and the most important parts of the story, there is not really the bridging events going through it. So instead of having a lull, it's more going into, here are just the most important parts of the story. I am not quite familiar with that style. I know from some of the videos that the author has put out and the way he's described stuff, he's a fan of the pulp fiction style. So I'm thinking that's where this was going, and that might be kind of the disconnect. I, for the most part, was able to get through it in about 2 sittings, I believe. And I did enjoy my time with it. I would say if you're in it just for action, it might be something up your alley. But there are a few jarring spots where there is basically no scenes in between the action. So there is kind of an event will happen and we'll skip amount of time to carry on to the next important event without any of what some would call filler, but it's more of basically lulls in the action, so it's not just constant action all the way through.
About how long did it take you to finish it? For me, I think it was probably 3-ish hours.
I think it was right about that time. Yeah.
So it's pretty short. So if you decide to invest your time in this, it's not like you're committing to a 30 chapter long epic. It's what, 10 chapters?
Something along those lines. It's about 100 pages, and even though when you look at it, it's comic book size, it would probably be about 100-page novelette. So I think it was kind of supposed to be that short pulp fiction style where you can get done with it in a few hours. So it's supposed to be a shorter story, not a long epic Is that kind of the thing you noticed when going through?
The jarring nature of it,
A
for
little
sure.
bit. Okay.
Most of the time when books do that, they signify a break. And what I found weird, like, they do a paragraph break or they include a little line there. And what I thought was weird about this is sometimes it did that, and other times it did not do that. And all of a sudden we're just in a different character's perspective, particularly near the beginning of the book, and that's all I'll say. Is you flip to another character's perspective, and I was very confused and had to reread that little section because I thought, what is going on? But you settle into it. You do settle into it, and you get used to it. So as you go through the book, I didn't find it as jarring as it went on, and I do think that part of it worked. I again, as someone who struggles to sit down and read stuff, I liked we're only hitting the key beats of it.
And I think some of that, basically the switch in perspective without the break, that might just be a slight editing issue. So that might be ironed out as more content comes out, as you get somebody working with you to edit and refine some of the stuff. So there's a good basis here, and it would be intriguing to see what comes next. I know there is another release of this that just came out about a month ago, so we might visit that just in case to see kind of if there's an improvement there. For the most part, if you're going for the style of short and punchy, it works. But some of the character interactions felt like they jumped a little too quickly, and that's just because there was a lot of time that was passed that we didn't really get to see.
Yeah, so I guess if you're like me and you need something to really grab you and you need something that is going to be compelling all the way through, this was not that for me.
Would you say you found value in the time, though?
I do not regret my time with it. I will never go back to it again, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The 3 hours was not a waste of time, if that answers the question.
Basically, I'm just trying to figure out, would you say pick it up, read it once, or not read it at all?
Pick it up, read it once. If you're at all interested in this sort of thing, read it once. Maybe rent it from the library if your library has it. But read it once.
I suppose we should give a kind of a rundown of what the actual setting is, because we didn't do that. We're just touching on what it was.
Oh, sure. That's a good idea. So it's set in this world created by the author, and the way he sets it up, it makes it seem like this is going to be a recurring setting for his stories. And I'd describe it as low magic fantasy.
That's what it seems like.
Or at the very least, this story is low magic fantasy. And we're basically following, without giving too much away, it's following a thief as he navigates through this city and gets involved in a plot.
Yeah, that's basically the best way to sum it up. He's a thief, not a cutthroat. He's not averse to combat, but for the most part, his job is to steal and get out without being noticed. And he gets involved in a plot in the underworld of the city, and the story carries on from that. I would say it's very low magic fantasy. It seems like even though it's low magic, most of the magic that's in there is very dangerous from what I would see.
I would agree, yeah.
I would say from my perspective, having a delay in shipping in one of our copies, I had to read it twice just because of the difference in time frame. I would say I would not regret my time reading it. I'm intrigued to see if there's an improvement in what comes next. I did find some of the writing style a little bit jarring, just in how it carried through, the way it broke from events. There could have been, I'm not talking there needs to be pages of dialogue explaining the different events, but if there's going to be a cut in time, there could have been maybe a sentence or a paragraph or two just to jump from one event to the other. But I would say I would recommend picking it up and reading it.
All right, should we spoiler it up?
Yep, we can spoiler it up now.
All right, everybody, here come the spoilers. If you don't want to hear them, get out of here. Run away. Scream and plug your ears because they're coming in 3, 2, 1. Boy, this guy jumps off of roofs a lot. He's a big fan of jumping off roofs. He really is, and out of windows and all kinds of stuff. That seems to be how almost every section ends.
Well, if it works for you once, why wouldn't you keep using it?
Right, if it ain't broke. If jumping off a roof ain't broke, why would you fix it?
So our main character of the story is a thief called Zerdes. And at first, when reading through it, I was a little worried that he was going to be extremely overpowered. Because the way it is set up, it seems like he's supposed to be a master thief and none can match him. But he does make several mistakes in the early section of the book that waylaid those fears.
Yeah, I had a similar fear. Like when I first started reading this guy and you hear some of his dialogue and you're like, this guy's kind of a edgelord is not the right word, but he's just this cocky kind of jerk of a character. Because any situation he ends up in, he's very confident that he'll get out of it, and he does most of the time. But yeah, you're right. That is alleviated by a few mistakes he makes throughout the story, and that concern goes away, and the character becomes much more compelling as the story goes on.
And it's some of that cockiness that you realize is actually an overconfidence in his abilities. It seems like he's very skilled at what he does, but he can get distracted during his exploits, and that can cause him issues when dealing with certain things that he comes across.
Yeah, it's cool because it's like he's so good that that's what's causing him to make mistakes, is that he is so good. And I think that's a good way to write a character who is incredibly skilled, is their skill detracts from their common sense sometimes, rather than just writing a character who knows how to do everything right off the bat, even though they've spent their whole life as a junker on a desert planet.
Whatever could you be speaking of?
I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there, you know?
Yes, his skill has become almost second nature to the point where he gets distracted while doing it. So it's almost like it's become rote for him. And that leads him into situations where in the second heist that he's doing, he ends up triggering a trap and getting hit with a hidden knife that turns out to be poisoned. And it leads to him being captured, which is a nice way of showing that he isn't all powerful and just walking through these things without any care in the world because he's so powerful and nothing can touch him.
And, you know, and looking back on the beginning of the book, he does get some really cool scenes that I thought were lame when I first thought that this guy was, you know, overpowered. But now looking back on the fact that he's not, there's some really cool stuff that he does. Like the way it's described, how it's when they're in where he lives, and the three characters, Ceres, Athros, and Dunwyn, break into his house, and he finds them there. And he does have some cool moments where he's like, well, even the wind moves differently through the place when there's someone here. And that's how he knows. And then he falls into one of those moments of cockiness where he thinks it's just the one guy there, and he sits down in his chair and then gets ambushed by Ceres with the knife to his throat. And then this whole thing, which I think was probably my favorite part of the book right at the beginning, is where he telegraphs this trap where he purposely looks to this certain corner of the room so that Athros will go over there, investigate, and then he plans all this out of how he's going to get out of this. And while it doesn't explicitly say it, you can kind of see the puzzle pieces coming together as the reader. And I thought that was really well done.
Yes, that was a really great part, because it's not giving up the thing right away. It's not telling you that he is the one in control of this entire thing, but through his actions, he's able to lead them to a trap that he has set up in case this ever happened. So you think this guy is somebody who has been in the game quite a while and has set up areas in case he's ever come to a spot where somebody is in his hideout trying to steal his stuff. And they end up finding a decoy of the items they're looking for and setting off a gas trap that ends up killing 2 of the assailants in there. And he's able to escape with his actual loot. And it shows that he's also somebody who has a pragmatic way of looking at things, even if you could possibly say it's an honor thing, or he didn't want to deal with it later. Because in the first encounter of the book, he is just there to steal items from a bar, and he ends up interfering with an assassination attempt where he knocks out these 3 individuals, and he ends up stealing Ceres's sword, which in her culture is something that's passed down for generations and something you can't lose. So she vows to kill him for this. So after they have captured him in his house, he returns her sword to her, not knowing if she'll die to the trap that he's left, but in case she doesn't, he's giving her his sword back, whether through honor or just the fact that he doesn't want to give her a reason to hunt him down later. Either could be valid.
Yeah, his actions during that don't make a total lot of sense to me. Because he's perfectly willing. He obviously doesn't care if people die, because those 2 other characters die. Yet he gives her a hint talking about how she may survive that. And is that just his arrogance showing again? Does he genuinely want her to live? That part was a little, what's going on here for me?
I'm not sure on that. Maybe he saw her as somewhat of an equal, because she did seem to be, of the 3, she seemed to be the much more capable of them.
And I guess he does mention near the beginning of the book he has an apprehension to harming women.
Yes. So I don't know. That might be some of the character development that might come in later. It's probably something to build on instead of spending 10 pages explaining his philosophy and going through everything like that. This is more of, we're going to give hints to what the character is and lead up to it later instead of putting it all out there right away. So dealing a little more in subtext than just dropping a big info dump, which is a different style of storytelling than some would choose.
All right, what else you want to talk about here?
We talked about him getting captured, and that leads into him being hired by one of the heads of an underground empire. So this head sees the value in Zerdus to be able to use him for his own gains. But he wants to make sure that he's actually loyal to him and not just going to take the spoils for himself right away. He's hired by Rolf Egeston. And I don't know if hired is quite the word. He's more waylaid into service.
He's shanghaied.
But he's promised a huge amount of resources to join. So there's a short interlude where he is working with Ceres under Rolf Egeston's group to basically do different heists to find out if he's worthy of being part of the big heist. And he's actually lied to about what the big heist is, because Rolf does not trust him yet to tell him about what the actual heist is going to be. And then we get some back and forth with the other rival gang in Manuvia, which is headed by Cyrus Welliver, who is actually the owner of the bar in the beginning of the book, who Ceres was supposed to kill, but she was interrupted by Zerdus during this. Whole bunch of names we just threw at everybody.
Make sure you're taking notes, people.
Yes. So through these interactions, it seems like Rolf has a lot of money to run the underworld, but it seems like Cyrus has more connections with the guards and some of the higher-ups. I don't know if he has so many ties with the higher-ups, but he's paying off a lot of guards, because one of their heists is interrupted by a whole squad of guards that Cyrus has paid off to stop them in their heist. After this, now that Rolf trusts Zerdus, he actually tells him what this actual heist is supposed to be. And they're supposed to steal from the actual guard tower, go into the vault, and steal some of the most valuable items in this entire realm.
Dun dun dun.
The Pearls of Hardival. And they are supposedly in an impenetrable fortress, because this is deep in the city barracks. There's only one way in. There's a door that cannot be opened only from the inside. So, of course, with an impenetrable vault, only the best thief would be able to sneak in and steal the items. So they go into the fortress, and they're able to get into the vault. Actually, Zerdus is the only one able to get in because of the precarious nature of how this area is set up. He has to form a single rope that he's fired from a bow to get across a chasm to get to this vault. And unfortunately, the Pearls of Hardival are protected by a concussive energy, a wave of magic that repulses anything that comes near it. And when he breaks that, it causes such a concussive wave that it knocked out of commission. So he's not able to escape the same way, and they basically have to raise the alarm because they have to drop the bridge for him to be able to escape. And while they're doing that, while they're waiting for certain death to arrive from the guards approaching, Cyrus Welliver comes in, killing a bunch of guards and opening the door to allow them to escape. Which means at some point, Rolf and Cyrus teamed up, which they had teamed up in the past, which you find out from little blurbs in the book, explaining that they had a tenuous treaty. They were supposed to stay in their own areas, agree to not interfere in each other's business. And apparently this heist was worth enough for them to actually team up. After the heist, Rolf double crosses Zerdus and does not give him the promised payout from this.
Which, how he did not see that coming, I don't know. You know, that's what I was thinking the whole time, but I guess Zerdus probably has not seen all the heist movies that we've seen.
Possibly. I think he might have understood it was coming.
But I guess he really had no choice.
Yes, he was kind of stuck in this situation where he had not been getting the payout that he had agreed to. Even if he wouldn't have gotten one of the pearls, he should have gotten some of the money that he'd been procuring for Rolf. So I look at it, Zerdus may have been a little foolish for not seeing the double cross coming, but Rolf showed his foolishness in actually double crossing one of the best thieves that he's seen ever.
Sure, which, come on, man. You're not going to give the best stealers of money? And you don't think that guy is going to steal your money? He's a thief. It's in his name. Thief.
Apparently, he was completely convinced that his secret vault access that he had could not be bypassed.
And not only that, you just gave him practice stealing this thing for you. You warmed him up.
Yes, apparently his vault he thought was more impenetrable than the vault containing the pearls.
You teased the closing pitcher by telling him to pitch balls.
Unfortunately, Rolf was mistaken in his assumptions. And Zerdus, along with Ceres, steal the remaining 2 pearls of Hardival from Rolf. After they have stolen that from him, they are trying to they're jumping hideouts to try and stay ahead of Rolf searching for them. And unfortunately, we forgot to mention in the very beginning of the book, when Zerdus was stealing items from the bar, he noticed Cyrus had his usual fence tied up. And unfortunately, after that heist went through, Cyrus killed his fence, which is important and had to be said because Zerdus no longer has someone to be able to take the loot that they've taken from Rolf and sell it on the black market. So Ceres, she has to take it. Oh, I forgot to mention, because it's brought up really fast in the book, that Ceres and Zerdus apparently had a huge attraction to each other, and they became lovers. So they were enjoying their time after the heist, after they stole from Rolf, and they were going to retire together and leave the city. At least that's what we're supposed to believe. But unfortunately, since Zerdis could not fence it himself, Saris had to go and fence the items. And the fence she goes to turns her over to Rolf. It's not specifically said, but she ends up being horribly murdered and pegged to a wall as a message to Zerdis.
Which, nice change of pace right there. I appreciate a good lover getting murdered every once in a while, because you don't see it too often. And that sounds like a joke, but I'm being completely serious. Like, yeah, in the real world, the power of love doesn't do that much. To actually stop bad things from happening.
It depends on what stories you go with. There is a trope that's out there that some people see it as wrong for the love interest to be killed just as motivation.
No, I say kill him. Kill him dead.
I even in this one, you look at it, Zerdis, he had inklings of the things that he was doing would lead to a bad place. It's mentioned in the book that he has a dark feeling about the things he's doing and how it could lead to bad places, but he's dreaming of the hopeful ending, and the hopeful ending is dashed from him instantly. And she's murdered, and he basically becomes a being of vengeance that wants to see those that not only stole from her, but also his ill-gotten gains. So he starts off and ends up starting a war between Rolf and Cyrus, which leads into the actual name of the book, The Long Moonlight. It is basically each night the two warring factions send out their mercenaries and their cutthroats, and they end up killing each other on the streets. So they have to pay more cutthroats and mercenaries and each night it's just endless combat between the two vying for position in the city, which was an interesting story progression, because here you have two guys that work together. Zerdis actually went to Cyrus's place and stole the pearl that he was given for the heist and left evidence that implicated Rolf, which started the whole process. So he started this whole war. So that was an interesting thing of actually cause and effect leading to where it is. You can actually see the different motivations leading the wrong way and coming to this point.
I also like that throughout this story, Zerdis stays a thief. The way he solves this isn't by this noble deed. Like, he doesn't become a quote-unquote hero. I mean, he is the hero of the book, but he doesn't become this valiant character. Because if you think about what he's done, he's caused unimaginable violence and probably getting innocent people killed. And it's not necessarily a good thing that he's done, but I like that. I like that this doesn't fall into he needs to be this honorable thief.
I also like that he is still a thief and he doesn't become a amazing killing machine.
Right.
He actually doesn't get his vengeance through actually killing the people straight up. In fact, there is an assassination taken out against him. We don't know by who, either by Rolf or Cyrus, obviously, because they're the ones that would have the money to pay for this. But he actually comes up against this assassin and is able, through some skill, but a little bit of luck, is able to overcome this threat, even though in a straight up fight, he knows that he doesn't have a chance against this type of warrior because that is not his specialty. So that was nice that they didn't just have him going out and going up against all the warriors and just wiping the floor with them because he's a thief. He's not meant to be taking on these warriors or these skilled assassins, which was a nice change of pace. Again, going back to a character that is specialized. They have a certain set of skills, not like Liam Neeson. They have a very, very small set of skills that they're very good at. But outside of that, there are other people that are better than them. And they have to be careful when delving into those realms. Didn't know if you had anything you wanted to...
No, I don't think so. I think your summation of the story is much more compelling to me than the story was.
I don't know why that is.
I think it's because the story had a lot of good key bits. It had these really good moments in it that to me were, despite the shortness of the book, were surrounded by stuff that was not compelling to me. And I think an issue I had with this is the style of writing, and I didn't think about it till just now. The style of writing to me just isn't compelling. It feels rushed, if that makes any sense. Like the way we skip between these things, it just feels rushed. And we touched on this a little bit at the beginning. And these concepts, when we're outlining them broadly and we're just describing, these are the events that happened, it allows me to fill in my mind better things than what I read, if that makes any sense. I'm not saying that I'm a better writer than this guy, because I'm definitely not. I'm just saying I'm in my head, I'm forming the ideas of what I would have liked to have seen in the book when we're just outlining like this.
I think it probably has to do with the fact that as we're discussing it, we're actually thinking about why these events happened, and we can see the logical progression for them. So there's a logical progression for them, but the fast pace of the book doesn't really set you up to actually think about how all these events line up. So it's more of, as discussion happens, you can think about, oh, okay, that makes sense why this fits together, which is, it's nice to see in a story that those were taken into account. So we have a logical progression, and once you go back and look at it, oh, okay, that it makes sense why those things happened, instead of when you try and go back and look at certain movies that come out now and why did this happen? And the moment you even think about one of those small little dominoes, all the entire story falls apart, because, well, why would they do that? And then the next thing you come across is like, well, that's an even bigger hole. And it's like, by the time you've gotten this huge truck that you can drive through the story. So this thing has a nice progression. Unfortunately, because of the speedy nature of, I think, the style he's going for, I would need to be more familiar with the pulp fiction variety. But the way I understood it, it's meant for, you have a short amount of time. Basically, there's supposed to be something that you can pick up and read when you just have short little moments to get into it. It's not a long epic. So that could possibly be where, when we're looking at it, we're able to see how everything fits in and able to kind of spread out some of those ideas and fill in kind of the spaces that are not in the actual narration. But that would lead us into the final section of the story, where we have a master plan set into place, where Xerdus has stolen records from both Rolf and Cyrus. And at first you're wondering, is he stealing these to implicate them to the police or basically the guards? But apparently not. He was stealing those so he would have some type of reference of their writing style, so that he could have someone forge paperwork to get these two together and actually fight each other. Because Xerdus is not able to take either of these guys out in a straight up fight. So he pits them both against each other. And through their dueling personalities, they end up killing each other. Or one kills the other and is trapped underneath him inside a burning building. And Xerdus is able to basically have his last moment and tell Rolf where he messed up. All he had to do was pay Xerdus, and none of this would have happened.
Which, I liked that part too. My two favorite parts of this book were probably right at the beginning and right at the end.
Yes, Xerdus is able to lay out, because Rolf is trapped. Cyrus has been shown to be a much larger man than Rolf. He's a bruiser style of attacker. Rolf is much more technique based in his fighting style. So he's the better fighter, but the raw brutality of Cyrus ends up with Rolf having killed Cyrus and Cyrus landing on top of him in this burning building. And Xerdus, and probably the best line in the book, because Cyrus is begging Xerdus. Rolf is trapped underneath Cyrus in this burning building, and he needs help getting him off to be able to escape this. He's offering Xerdus all that he could ever want. Basically, he's offering him all the money he would ever want, territories that he could ply his trades, or territories that would pay him. Basically, he's offering him anything that he wants. And Xerdus chuckled darkly. "Haven't you heard?" he said. And he reaches out and he pulls out 2 of the Pearls of Hardival. I'm the richest man in Manuvia. All he had to do was get paid, and none of this would have happened. And now he has more resources than anybody else. So there's nothing that Rolf can offer him. And Zerdus leaves him there to die.
Which, little cliched, but still awesome.
Little cliched, but it's more appropriate for this type of character.
Right.
It fits much better here than in Batman Begins. Or Batman says, I'm not going to kill you, but that doesn't mean I have to save you. Whoosh, and away he goes. And the interesting thing is we find out that it seems like Zerdus is more a thief for the thrill of it than the actual payoffs. Because at the end of the book, he had a purse of gold that he had stolen from Rolf when he left his employ, as well as the 2 pearls of Hardival. And he lets all of those burn in the fire. And then exits into the night. That's where the book ends. Then we fade to black.
I am intrigued by where this is going. I will say that, despite me not really enjoying the book, I'm intrigued by where it's going, because talking about this now, you can see a lot of potential here. And it'd be really cool to see something awesome done with that.
So I might have nudged you a little bit further through our talk into a more of a recommend.
Yeah. You have nudged me a little further towards a recommend. I would more so say check out this series, or the potential for this series. You said there's another one out. I'd be intrigued to look at that book just based on what we talked about here, to see if the improvements that I would have liked to have seen in this book show up in that one.
And I see that as kind of the potential, because looking at this book and kind of trying to look at it compared to what the mainstream, or what is considered the mainstream publishers, are pumping out now, I would say this is leagues above what they're putting out. This was more about the characters and the story, and not about checking boxes. So there was not a worry about, we need to have particular characters, we need to make sure that certain characters are the villains, because we don't want to be in the wrong side of history for not including the incorrect things in our book.
I think that's what this was. This book wasn't woke enough for me. I'm joking.
But that's why, it takes, that's why I'm not being as forgiving. I'm just seeing there is something more there than just, we're just ticking boxes. You can see there was actually a plan in here. And when you break down the story, you can see the elements that works its way to get to the end. And there's actually a through line that makes sense.
And undoubtedly, despite the things that I didn't like, there is passion here. And I know we talked about this way back when we did the ISOM review, where I said you can tell that the person who made this cared about it, and that makes you root for it when that's the case.
Yeah, you can tell there is somebody's trying to create something here because they really enjoy what they do, and they weren't just given, we need to write this story, here it is, go do it. Which we see so many, especially with all the streaming services going on now, where we need to have content coming out every week so we keep people paying. It doesn't have to be good content. It just has to be constant content so that we have people sitting there with the fear of missing out. I don't want to be the one that hasn't watched the new thing so that I don't know what people are talking about. Here's the thing, just kind of a course of how we're doing these reviews. We don't care if we miss out on something, because if it looks like it's most likely trash, for the most part, we're not going to watch it. I enjoy people breaking down something that's really bad, but I have a hard time sitting down constantly watching something that doesn't interest me and actively hates me. So I don't believe we'll ever get to the point where we're just watching something because it's the trendy thing to do a bad review of it. We might watch a trailer, we might watch the pilot episode of something, but I don't know if we'll carry on through the entire series.
And if we ever do fall into the trend train, hire a thief, have him come steal something from each of us and frame the other so that we kill each other in a fiery blaze.
And we'll tie back to this review.
So I just want to thank everybody for tuning into this, and I have to put in a little plug here at the end because I am the host of another show. It's actually a podcast called Full of Shit, and you can find it on Spotify. Just type in Full of Shit, the 3 words, and it's basically just a wacky show where we just discuss just about anything. And that typically comes out on Fridays.
And also you can find the link in the description of this video. You can join us again. We'll be releasing one every week. So if you enjoyed this, come back, recommend it to somebody, check out Full of Shit on Spotify, and we'll catch you next time.
One of the things we say on Full of Shit all the time is if you really want to help the show, take one of your friends' phones and then subscribe to this channel forcibly without them knowing. And then maybe one day they will stumble across it and they'll watch it, and you've planted the seeds. You've indoctrinated another fan.
Perfect.